Hi, my name is Matthew. Welcome to our 5-part property series designed to help you understand the financial and legal considerations of renting, buying and inheriting property, plus what each of those could mean for your retirement. In this series we're going to explore renting a property, buying a property alone, buying a property with someone, inheriting a property, and finally, using your property in retirement. So, let's get started with the basics of renting a property. There are two main ways to rent a property in the UK, through a letting agent or via a private landlord. Let's look at the difference. Letting agents are responsible for managing properties on behalf of private landlords and ensuring that their legal responsibilities to tenants are met. As a tenant, you'd raise any issues to them rather than directly to your landlord. Many reputable estate agents specialise in both sales and lettings, so speaking to your local branch or using websites like Rightmove and Zoopla are good places to start. It's also a good idea to check online reviews and speak to friends who rent in your desired area for personal recommendations. Now let's take a look at the pros and cons. There are several benefits of renting via a letting agent. 1. In the UK, they're all regulated, which means that they have to follow a certain code of conduct. 2. You'll be provided with a legally binding tenancy agreement before moving in. This sets out the agreed terms such as the duration of the tenancy, the notice period you and your landlord have to give to end the tenancy, and the amount of rent you owe each month. Depending on whether you live alone or with others, tenancy arrangements can vary. More on this in a moment. But what about the disadvantages? Well, since the Tenant Fees Act was passed in 2019, which prohibits letting agents from charging tenants letting fees, there aren't many disadvantages for tenants. But some companies will be better than others, so be sure to do your research. A private landlord is someone who decides to let a property themselves without the support of a letting agent. They may be a professional landlord who has a portfolio of properties, or they may be what's known as an accidental landlord, someone who's found themselves in the position of owning a property that they want to let out. For example, a person who's had to relocate for a job and wants to rent out their home rather than leave it empty. There are lots of ways to find a private landlord. Many share their properties online via popular websites like OpenRent. Again, let's go through the pros and cons of renting through a private landlord. In terms of benefits, 1. You deal with them directly, which cuts out the middleman and can result in faster, easier communications. And 2. You can get to know your landlord and build a mutually respectful relationship. But what about the disadvantages? Firstly, private landlords aren't regulated in the way that letting agencies are. Sadly, fraudsters can take advantage of this by scamming prospective tenants out of money using fake adverts. Familiarise yourself with the signs to watch out for on experian.co.uk and searching for how to spot rental fraud. Secondly, you won't necessarily be provided with a legally binding tenancy agreement. A private landlord may suggest a more informal arrangement, which could provide you with less security. Thirdly, private landlords might not have the same specialist knowledge as letting agents. If they're less experienced and unaware of their legal responsibilities, you could be more likely to receive bad service or poor treatment. As well as taking on board the points mentioned here, it's a good idea to do your own independent research. As we touched upon earlier, all letting agents should provide you with a tenancy agreement before moving in. There are two main types of tenancy agreement, a joint tenancy and a sole tenancy. If you're planning on living alone, this won't affect you, but if you're planning on moving in with another person or a group of people, it will. Let's look at the difference and dive into what these terms mean. Having a joint tenancy agreement means you have one tenancy agreement which each person in the property signs. You all share the property and don't have exclusive possession of any part, although it's likely you've each agreed between yourselves to occupy one particular bedroom. But this agreement is just between you and will not bind your landlord. You're liable for the whole amount of any rent due, which means that you'd be responsible for making up the shortfall if another tenant was unable to pay their share. This is what is meant by you being jointly and severally liable in a contract. And if one tenant wanted to move out and everyone else wanted to stay, this would technically mean ending the agreement for everyone. However, your landlord may allow the remaining tenants to find a replacement. Having a sole tenancy agreement means each person living in the property has their own separate tenancy agreement. You'd be renting a specific area of the property, usually a bedroom, but you share responsibility for communal areas such as the kitchen and living room with your roommates. You're only liable for your agreed share of the rent, and if another tenant was unable to pay theirs, this wouldn't affect your tenancy. And if another tenant wanted to move out, it wouldn't affect anyone else's tenancy. So, which option is best for you? This will depend on your individual circumstances, but generally speaking, joint tenancy is more common when you're moving in with a trusted friend, partner, or relative, and sole tenancy is more common when you're moving into a shared property that's already occupied. You can find out more information about your rights as a tenant at gov.uk. Renting a property involves more than just paying your monthly rent. You'll need to consider any upfront costs and expenses associated with moving, such as van rental, cleaning fees, and most importantly, a deposit. This is a sum of money, usually 1 month's rent, that you pay to your landlord before you move in. Landlords and letting agents are required by law to use a tenancy deposit protection or TDP scheme, which ensures you'll get your deposit back when you vacate the property, provided you meet the terms of your tenancy agreement, do not damage the property, and pay the rent and bills. When it comes to monthly costs, your rent is likely to be your biggest expense. Along with this, you'll need to pay utilities, council tax, and any service charge that's specified in your rental agreement. It's also worth considering things like parking fees if you drive, and contents insurance. While there are lots of everyday costs to consider when renting a property, it's important to pay attention to your long-term finances too. This can be difficult as renting costs often rise over time, but consistent saving, however small, can help you build a secure financial future. Here are a few things you can do. If you're employed and eligible, ensure you're enrolled in your workplace pension scheme. Consider starting a personal pension, especially if you're self-employed. Set up an ISA, an individual savings account, to take advantage of tax-free savings. Start saving as early as you can to benefit from compound interest. If you're really struggling to save for the future, you may want to consider reducing the amount you contribute to your pension rather than stopping payments altogether. If you're renting and approaching retirement age, you'll need to factor ongoing housing costs into your finances. You could be renting in retirement for a number of reasons. For example, you might have previously owned a property that you needed to sell during a separation. You may have always intended for your property to form the basis of your retirement income, so have recently sold it to free up cash. Or you simply chose to rent to enjoy more flexibility over where you'd like to live. Whatever your circumstances, there are pros and cons to renting in retirement. Let's explore the benefits first. Renting a property gives you more freedom and flexibility. It's often easier and faster to move as you don't have to worry about finding a buyer and going through the process of selling your home. Whether you want to live near a family or spend some of your retirement by the coast or abroad, you have more freedom to relocate without all of the costs of buying and selling, such as stamp duty and solicitors' fees. Renting a property typically requires less maintenance. Should you need any home improvements, your landlord or letting agent may sort this out for you. This will depend on the terms of your agreement, so always be sure to check before committing to a tenancy. Retirement communities often offer rental properties. This could mean you'd be surrounded by people at a similar stage in their lives. Other benefits to these communities could include security and access to amenities and services like laundry. Of course, there are financial considerations to renting in retirement too. Rental costs could restrict your freedom. You might be restricted with the type of property and location that you can afford. It's worth bearing in mind that your rent costs will vary depending on where you live in the UK. In some areas, average rent could be more than your projected retirement income. Rental costs are likely to rise. You'll need to work this into your budget and be prepared for ongoing increasing costs. It's likely that rises in rental costs may not be matched by rises in your retirement income. With increasing rent, you might also be forced to downsize to a smaller and more affordable home as time goes on. There's a potential for instability. While tenancy agreements do offer some security, there's always the chance you might be asked to leave if the owner wants to move back in or sell their property. If you're paying rent rather than a mortgage, you won't be building equity over time and so won't be able to convert your home into a financial asset by selling it. This means you also can't leave the property to loved ones in the event of your death, should you so wish. As always with investments, your capital is at risk. The value of your investment can go down as well as up, and you may get back less than you invest. This information should not be regarded as financial or legal advice. Thanks for watching, and don't forget to watch the other episodes in this series.